try to summarize. So in today's class, we will deal with ecology. And of course, ecology is a very big topic, you know. And for this, we are allotted 3 classes. But of course, I don't know, we missed 2 classes. Anyway, according to the timetable given, this is the last class, I think. If we get 1 more or 2 more classes, we'll discuss in detail the leftover topics of ecology. Now, in today's class, I'll give brief introduction about ecology, ecosystem, and then ecological succession, and also environmental pollution. Now, to begin with, ecology. What do you mean by ecology? Of course, the concept of ecology has been introduced to you even in high school level itself, wherein you were acquainted with what we call what is nature and what are the organisms that are present in the nature or in our surroundings, and how different plant groups are related to each other, and how these plant groups are in turn influenced by the atmosphere around, etc. We discussed. You had a brief introduction about that. Now, in today's first, we'll begin with the ecosystem. So now this is a very, very common topic, of course, wherein ecosystem, wherein the ecosystem, the term ecosystem was first coined by Tansley, and which gives he defines the ecosystem as interrelation between organisms and their environment. Odom, a famous ecologist, he says that the ecosystem is nothing but the study of the structure and function of the community, different communities that are present in a given specified area. So in whatever the definition that may be, the gist of this definition about ecosystem is that the different organisms. Organisms, when I say organisms, your plants, animals, even microorganisms also fall under that category. So the organisms, how organisms influence one another, and how the organisms of a species intraspecific, how the intraspecific activity goes on, and how interspecifically the organisms interact with one and the other, and how do different plant populations that are present in a given area, how they are related and how do they influence one another, etc. We will learn about this concept under ecosystem. So now in ecosystem generally, there are 2 important things, 2 important functional. So Odom, he gave that structure and function. Structure means what are the different organisms, and the function here, in function we mean how the materials and how the energy and how the energy and materials, how they are changing, and how the different organism, that is structure. Under structure, the organisms, the populations, the community, and the ecosystem. Different plant communities that are present in an area, how these various plant groups and animal groups are related to one another, how do they influence one another, we will be learning in today's topic. Now, the 4 important things you have to remember. One is organisms, the other is what we call the population, and the community. See, the organisms, say for example, Oryza sativa, that is rice. So different rice varieties make what we call the organism or a species. That Oryza sativa has so many varieties. All those varieties fall under Oryza sativa only. Such different species form what we call populations. See, for example, if you go to a field as such, or for example, for that matter, take your house itself. See, the ecology comes from oikos and lagos. Oikos means house, Logos means study. Study of the house is ecology. So here in the study of the house, here we mean, see, for example, if you take your own house as a as an important community as such. So you have different organisms. See, human beings are there, cats are there, rats are there, lizards are there, cockroaches are there. So many organisms are there. All these organisms put together, they form what we call the biotic community. The biotic community. And of course, even apart from this, even in your balcony, for example, if you are interested in you know in raising or in growing plants, you have different plant groups also. See, common thing is, for example, in every household you find what we call tulasi. So tulasi is also a plant. Of course, nowadays you have what we call money plant is there, roses are there, different plants are there. So these plants, whatever the animals I listed, and including human beings, and these are organisms, and how these organisms are influenced by environment. So here, two important things: the organisms and the environment. These two are important, organisms and the environment. So whenever I say organisms, what comes to your mind? Different types of organisms we have. So the organisms are of different types. See, for example, they are classified into what we call autotrophs or producers. All plants fall under this producers. Producers means that produce their own food by using, chlorophyll molecule and trapping light energy and converting into chemical energy, that is synthesizing their starch or glucose. These are all autotrophs. Then, of course, heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are our, all, animals fall under this. So these animals, of course, the in ecological term, generally, plants are called producers. They are called produce. They all autotrophics are called producers. They produce the food. They manufacture the food. Then the other group is consumers. They are the producers and the consumers. Of course, in consumers, we have, different categories of consumers. See, for example, if grass is there, if you take a field as such, if you take a field as an example, you have, for example, it is a wheat or jowar or your rice. All the plants are producers. All the crop plants are producers. Then consumers. What are consumers here? The grass eaters. The grass eaters are consumers. What are they? For example, all our grass eaters, including your cattle as such. Cattle. They are called consumers. They are otherwise called herbivores. They are grass eaters are called herbivores. Okay. Then, say for example, deer is there. Deer is a herbivore which eats grass. Then there is another group of animal which feeds on deer. That is second group of animal. They are called carnivores. So you have herbivores, you have carnivores, producers, herbivores, carnivores, and of course these carnivores, top carnivore. There is one more carnivore. For example, if you take like for example, cropland, you take a grasshopper, for example. Grasshopper feeds grass. It is a herbivore. Then the grasshoppers are eaten by frog. This is a carnivore, first level. Then the frogs are eaten by snakes, next level carnivore. Then of course the snakes are eaten by, for example, an eagle, that is called top carnivore. So carnivores are of various types. So herbivores are grass eaters. Carnivores are flesh eaters. They are the flesh eaters. And of course, when all herbivores, of course, carnivores, first level carnivore, second level, third level, top carnivore. Of course, after some time, some years, all organisms would die. Of course, death is certain for all organisms. When they die, what happens? There are certain microorganisms and fungi. They act upon all these organisms and they putrefy it. They act upon them and convert these complex substances into simpler substances, whereby various gases are released into the atmosphere and various minerals that are present in the body of these dead organisms will be released into soil. So even the microorganisms are also consumers. Of course, the consumers are the dead matter eaters. They are called what called that is another cycle, that detritus cycle. That is detritus. So what I mean to say here is, if you observe very closely, you will see in nature one organism depends on other organism. One organism forms the food, acts as a food for the other organism. So thereby what is happening in nature? Eating and being eaten by. You are eating something and you are eaten by something. So like this, there occurs a kind of homeostasis, what we call. There occurs a kind of equilibrium in nature. There is an equilibrium. Say if you arrange the grass plant, grasshopper, frog, snake, and an eagle. So these you will find, a kind of chain. This chain, what we call a food chain. One organism depending on other organism, they form a kind of chain. This is called a food chain. This is called a food chain. So what I mean to say here is, so all organisms, that is, for all the ultimate producers are crop plants, or in case of a terrestrial ecosystem. If it is a aquatic ecosystem, that is, for example, if you take a pond, if you take a tank, if you take a shallow river, in that also you find different organisms. You find different organisms. For example, if you take a pond, what do you find? You find certain plants which are visible to your eye. There are small algal members which are unicellular. You cannot see them. Those small organisms which are seen floating or suspended in water and capable of the fixing carbon dioxide and thereby doing photosynthesis. They are also producers. So all organisms that are capable of doing photosynthesis are called producers. Okay, so like this, the producers are there, but of course, if it is a grass plant, of course you can see. We have seen a grasshopper, wherein a frog, a snake, and of course that is a food chain in a crop plant, a field, a crop field, a terrestrial ecosystem, what we call. If it is an aquatic ecosystem, for example, in a pond, you find small microscopic algal members. They are called phytoplankton. Phytoplankton. And of course, these phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton. Zooplankton are small animals. And these small animals are eaten by small fish. These small fish are eaten by big fish. Big fish are eaten by cranes. So like this, here also you find a kind of food chain. This we call an aquatic food chain. Food chain in a pond ecosystem. So the ecosystems are primarily classified into two categories. One is terrestrial ecosystem. The other is what we call an aquatic ecosystem. Terrestrial ecosystem is, again, for our convenience, you can divide them into what we call a cropland ecosystem, a desert ecosystem. Okay, a cropland ecosystem, a desert ecosystem. You can see, or even even cold areas. If you go to Himalayan, like those areas, also you have a land ecosystem only. But the other is what we call an aquatic ecosystem. The aquatic ecosystem, for our convenience, we divide it into two categories. One is freshwater ecosystem, the other is marine ecosystem. The freshwater ecosystem, for our convenience, you can divide again into lentic ecosystem, lotic ecosystem. Lentic means wherein the water is still, in case of a tank, in case of a pond. Lentic, still, no movement. The other is what we call, in case of a stream or a river, always water flows. This we call a lotic ecosystem. Okay. Then, of course, you have what we call estuaries, wherein, for example, where these rivers go and mix with or fuse with what we call seas. This mouth where the river enters into a sea. They are called estuaries. The confluence of the river with a sea. This estuaries, there also you can see these food chains, of course. Even there, the productivity rate is very, very more in that area, because in estuaries, you will see various minerals and salt silts are there. Hence, its productivity rate is very, very high. Okay, this is a freshwater ecosystem. Of course, marine ecosystem. If you go to even in a sea also, you will see various organisms. Of course, the algae. The algae are the producers. Of course, the algae eaters, fish, are what we call, consumers. And these are again eaten by big fish or even other big animals that are there in sea. So here, this is a terrestrial ecosystem and a what we call aquatic ecosystem. So now here, uh, for example, Odom. Odom, he uh, he divides. So now he divides them, he divides them into 6 main categories, of course. What are they? There are 6 components are there. One is what we call the important first component is they are what we call, say, for our convenience, you can divide ecosystem into primarily of 3 important. Some people divide into 2, some other divide into 3. For example, they are abiotic components and biotic components. Let us take them as only under 2 heads. Abiotic and biotic. Abiotic means no life. Biotic means it is related to life. The biotic are again divided into what we call plants, animals, and microbes. Plants, animals, and microbes. Abiotic, for example, it is divided into what we call materials and environment. Materials and environment. Under materials, you can divide materials into organic and inorganic. Organic means all, your proteins, carbohydrates, fats, flesh, all these fall under organic. Inorganic means all mineral nutrients. And of course, the other is what we call environment. Environment, under environment, what are the different components of environment? Your light, water, temperature, all these fall under this what we call components of ecosystem. So there are 6 important components. One is, for example, inorganic, organic, climatic, and of course, the producers, the consumers, and the micro consumers. So like this ecosystem, you can divide in various ways, but whatever the kind of classification you do, primarily it consists of what we call biotic and abiotic. Biotic producers, consumers, and micro consumers. And of course, abiotic materials and the environment. Materials, organic, inorganic. Environment, light, temperature, and what we call water. Okay, so like this, for our convenience, we divide the ecosystem into various components. Now, of course, after knowing this, we will move to what we call on the basis of you know uh, availability of the water. On the basis of the availability of the water, the plants are divided. Plants are divided into, say in examination, they will ask you define ecosystem and write in detail about the various components of ecosystem. So you have to define ecosystem, then components. So whatever the 6 components just now I gave, you write about them. So then on the basis, now the plant groups, plant classification. So now warming. Warming was an ecologist who, based on the availability of the water, he classified. Plant groups into 3 categories. One is hydrophytes, xerophytes, and the third is mesophytes. Hydrophytes means plants which grow in water or in an area where there is a plenty of water, or plants that do not face any water shortage or scarcity in their life are called hydrophytes. Then of course xerophytes, the other extreme, that is plants which live in a xeric condition where there is a scarcity of water throughout their life. And in between these two comes mesophytes. One is hydrophytes, the other is xerophytes. In between is mesophytes. So mesophytes are the plants wherein they have optimum level of water availability or moisture availability. And all our crop plants fall under mesophytes only. Now first, we will discuss one by one. First of all, start with hydrophytes. So hydrophytes, as I already told you, hydrophytes are the plants that grow in an area where there is a plenty of water. Now these hydrophytes, again for our convenience, you can divide them into, hydrophytes like what we call, submerged. Submerged plants are the plants which are seen inside water. Submerged, as the term tells you. The submerged, for example, remember 3 or 4 important examples. For example, Utricularia, Ceratophyllum, Hydrilla, Potamogeton, Vallisneria. These are the hydrophytes. The hydrophytes are which are submerged. Then comes floating. Whenever we say floating, floating means they are found growing on the surface of the water body. They are found growing on the surface of the water body. See, for example, people who are living in Hyderabad, you can see if you go to Hussain Sagar, wherein you can see green mat formed by Eichhornia. So it is a floating hydrophyte. So Pistia eichhornia, Pistia eichhornia salvia, Ulfia. These are these are some of the Vazolla. These are floating. The floating hydrophytes, whatever names I give, say for example, Ulfia azolla, Salvinia or Eichhornia, even Trappa or Pistia. They are seen growing on the surface and they move as the water moves. Whenever there is a gust of wind, you see waves. So along with the gust of wind, they move from one part of the lake to the other part because they are floating on the surface. Then of course, there is one more category under floating wherein there are certain, plants which are growing in the shallow areas where the depth of the pond is very little, and they have, their root system attached to the bottom of the lake, and their foliage, that is stems and leaves, are above the surface. Example for this is, for example, you know, uh, what we call, they are Nymphia nilambium, lotus, Nymphia nilambium sagittaria. These are the plants that are, rooted and floating. So floating are one category, rooted and floating are other category. And of course, then comes what we call amphibians. Amphibians means these are found in the shallow areas where in rainy season you find plenty of water, but when it comes to, a drier part, that is maybe this season, still you will see they are seen on the edges of the pond, and still there is a mud, and there is a sufficient amount of water. So such plants which are seen growing in water and on the land, or in the area where the land and water meet. They are called amphibians of the plant kingdom. For example, ranunculus. Ranunculus is one, typha is another one. So ranunculus, cirrus, and typha, these are the amphibious plants. Now, the other important, so they may ask you, what are hydrophytes and how do you classify them, and explain each category with suitable examples. Then other important thing is, what are hydrophytes? Write briefly the adaptations developed by hydrophytes. Now these hydrophytes, the hydrophytes are plants which are seen growing in the areas where there is a plenty of water. So if too much is too not good, whether it is too much water or too much drought area. So it should be medium, sufficient. So here, because as there is excess of water, so they develop certain adaptations to suit to the environment where they are growing. So they have these, adaptations. We classify them into, morphological adaptations, anatomical adaptations, and also physiological adaptations. So to begin with, morphological adaptations. See, for example, morphological, wherein, for example, roots, you know, you tell me, because what is the function of the root? To absorption, to fix. But here, absorption, because everywhere there is water. Hence, every part of the plant body is able to absorb water from the surroundings. So the root system is poorly developed in them. The root system is poorly developed in them, and the root hairs are absent. Even root caps are absent. In some cases, in place of root caps, you will see root pockets. So what you have to write in hydrophytes? Root system is poorly developed. Then stem. Of course, as the plant body lives in water, the stems are weak, long, slender. Weak, long, and slender, and with, you know, um, uh, with erenchyme, you will see. So very thin, long, slender, and spongy, you will see. And in some cases, at the base of the stem, in case of rooted hydrophytes, the stem modifies into what we call rhizomes or corms. Then leaves, of course. The plants which are floating, there you will find luxuriant growth of leaves and expanded leaves, you can see. But on the parts of the plant body which are submerged, here the leaf gets, dissected. Why? Because the leaf is inside water. So in order to absorb more sunlight, the lamina of the leaf gets dissected. So this kind you will see on the superficial in the floating hydrophytes. For example, the biggest leaf, Victoria regia, what we call, Nilambia, Nymphia. In all these cases, you will see very big leaves. But unlike that, with Limnophila or Hydrilla, Vallisneria, wherein the leaf becomes, small, narrow, or ribbon-like, or dissected. Limnophila, heterophila. The superficial leaves above the ground are above the surface of the water body are full, entire, where dipped inside they are segmented. Hence, a plant bearing two types of leaves is called heterophily. Limnophilo heterophila is this one. Then these are physiological. So under physiological, you write, morphological, you write what we call root system, stem, leaf. Then anatomical. If you observe anatomy of the leaf, root, or stem, what you find, the common thing is the cuticle is absent. The epidermis is single layer. Cortex is full of parenchyma. The conducting tissue, xylem and phloem, poorly developed. The mechanical tissues are poorly developed. Okay? So these are anatomical. In all cases, in case of root, stem, and leaves, you find poor development of cuticle and single-celled epidermis. In all the cases, you find well-developed parenchyma, spongy parenchyma, and which helps in buoyancy. And conducting tissues, because everywhere water is there is no need for the well development of the xylem and phloem. Vascular bundles are poorly developed. Then because they live in water, even what we call mechanical tissue is also poorly developed. Okay. Now the physiological means physiological adaptations. Here the osmotic concentration, because if it is freshwater farms, generally the osmotic concentration of the lake water and the protoplasm are almost equal. Hence, there is no exoosmosis or endoosmosis will be seen. And as the plant does, respiration, it releases carbon dioxide, and whatever the carbon dioxide that is released will be stored in the parenchyma area, and that carbon dioxide will be used for photosynthesis. So this is the physiological adaptation. Then xerophytes. Now you have to do one thing. So whatever you wrote about the hydrophytes, morphological or anatomical, just you write antagonistic to it. Say, for example, root system, hydrophytes poorly developed, but is highly developed. Stem, weak, but stem is very stout. With no mechanical tissue, with mechanical tissue. Vasculature, poorly developed, vasculature well developed. Epidermis single layered, xerophytes multi-layered. You got it? So whatever the points you remember for hydrophytes, you write just opposite to that, those features become the features or adaptations of what we call xerophytes. Now xerophytes, are plants, as I already told you, live in area where there is a scarcity of water. So now xerophytes, for example, for our convenience, we divide them into three categories. One is the drought evaders or escapers, drought endurers, and drought resistors. Evaders are escapers. The drought escapers are plants. They have very short span of lifetime. They grow well in rainy season, and they'll complete their life cycle within a month or so. Good example for this is for Tribulus terrestris. The second category is, for example, the drought endurers. They endure, they face. Endurers means they face the drought. They are the real xerophytes. The real xerophytes endure, they withstand, they endure these xeric conditions. So, example for this drought endurers are, for example, your what we call Casuarina, your Prosophis juliflora, Acacia arabica, Calotropis. These are all the drought endurers. Drought endurers. And generally, the difference between drought endurers and drought resistors are generally the drought endurers. Here, the root system, of course, is well developed, and the root, of course, it grows more than the aerial stem because it has to absorb moisture from the soil. So for conduction, of course, the conducting tissues are well developed. And of course, here in endurers, to check the transpiration, they have what we call multiple epidermis, thick cuticle, and the stomata or sunken stomata. Sunken stomata are there in them. And generally, they do not store mucilage in their body, unlike drought resistors. See, for example, drought, the third category is drought resistors. So endurers generally they face boldly. How? There the leaves size becomes very small. The stipules get modified into spines. And if leaves are there very much reduced. And to use the moisture that is little available, they have sunken stomata. So they have thick bark over the stem. Now, unlike this, the drought resistors, when I will say drought resistors, that comes to your mind is what we call they wherein the dryness is only externally, internally they are happy, but they don't face any shortage of water. They are drought resistors. Example for drought resistors are, for example, your aloe vera, agave americana, cactus, opuntia, moholambeckia. These are the plants wherein they store water in their root system, in their stem, in their leaves. So whenever there is a water, rains, they store this water in the form of mucilage. And whatever the water they store in the form of mucilage, they will use that little water more judiciously, and thereby they resist the drought conditions. So under, the xerophytes, you have drought escapers, drought endurers, and drought resistors. So this is also they may ask you what are different categories of xerophytes and what kind of adaptations do they show. So you should be in a position to write about them. Okay. Then, of course, they may ask you, mangroves. They may ask you, halophytes. Under short notes, halophytes. Halophytes, they also show what we call xerophytic conditions. So halophytes are the plants. Generally, they are seen growing in the areas where estuaries, where the rivers meet seas. Because where they are meeting, seawater means seawater is highly saline. So in those saline conditions, only special type of plants are able to live. Such plants which are capable of living in the highly saline conditions are called halophytes. The halophytes, they too show certain adaptations. Generally, they show xerophytic conditions because though water is present, but because of salty nature, they cannot use it freely. So they have, whenever there are rains, when the fresh water is available during rains, they absorb that water and store in their body. But of course, two important, modifications, adaptations you find in halophytes are what we call special type of, you know, roots in them. Special type of roots in them. See, the halophytes are, they can otherwise called, even mangroves. Of course, mangroves and halophytes are almost same. They're almost same. A little bit difference is there, but in both of them, mangroves generally, they are found in the areas I told you where rivers meet the seas. For example, Sundarbans, where Ganges meets Bay of Bengal. In case of, Andhra, wherein the Godavari and Krishna meet, the Bay of Bengal, Kaveri, or even in Andaman areas. So the areas where these big rivers or small rivers meet sea at those confluence areas, because of high salt nature of the water, the only special type of vegetation is seen growing them, and those special type of plants which grow under saline conditions are called halophytes or mangroves. So these mangroves, for example, you have to remember two or three plants: Rhizophora, Avicennia, Bruguera. Three important. And they, what we saw, you have to remember them, two important things is they have what we call special type of roots called pneumatophores, because the root system enters into the water body. Because of high salinity, the amount of oxygen that is present in saline water is very, very little. So to meet their oxygen requirements, they produce specialized roots which become aerial. Such aerial roots are called pneumatophores or respiratory roots, otherwise called respiratory roots. And the other important phenomenon is what we call vivipary. Vivipary is the phenomenon of development of the seed in the fruit when it is still attached to the mother. This is called vivipary. So, because why, you may ask me? Because if the fruit falls and if the fruit breaks, the seeds cannot germinate in salty water. So to check this, the plant has adapted a phenomenon of vivipary, wherein the fruit, before it falls, the seeds germinate, and you will see a seedling with a plumule and radical stem, an young stem and an young root. So this falls in the water and in the shore areas, because already the root system is developed and shoot system is developed. It fixes itself to the substratum and develops into a well-developed plant body. Then, of course, you find, under short notes, what we call these mangroves, and also another category is epiphytes. So epiphytes are, so don't get confused with epiphytes and parasites. So epiphytes are autotrophs. They have their foliage. Epiphytes are the specialized group of plants. They are seen growing in the areas where you find in the tropical forests, where there is a luxuriant growth of plant, vegetation. Under those conditions, you will see specialized type of plants growing on the branches of big trees. So they don't have any connection with the soil. They are seen growing on the stems or in the crevices of the big logs, not attached to the soil. So such specialized, plants are called, epiphytes. Epi means over, phyta means plant. Plants, some plants growing on other plants, but not for food. They only take shelter. They only take shelter, that's all. They have two types of roots: clinging roots and what we call the absorbent roots, velamen roots, what we call. Clinging roots and velamen roots. Clinging roots are as the name tells you, they enter into the crevices and they fix this plant body. And to meet their water requirement, they have specialized roots called velamen roots. They have a tissue by name velamen. This absorbs moisture from the atmosphere, thereby meets its requirements. And the clinging roots that enter into the crevices or into the areas, gaps on the big trees. So when there is a gust of wind, the dust particles may get deposited there. So this, when there is a rain, moisture is organisms there, fallen leaves, etc. You see a formation from that humus. They absorb requirements, mineral requirements. So they get their mineral requirements from that, and also support from that, but water requirements only from atmosphere by using their velamen roots. So such specialized plants growing in tropical areas, tropical forests are called, uh, epiphytes. Example, for example, good example is Vanda. Vanda is a good example. Teniophyllum is another example for this type of epiphyte. Now, we will see what we call, the food chains and food webs. So food chain, food web, food chain. Good example, food chain is, I told you already. For example, a crop plant. Crops, grasshopper, then frog, snake, and vulture. They are connected. It's a kind of chain. This is called food chain. Food web is, so in nature, this relation. Only one organism eating the other organism you don't find. For example, you take our own case of what we call human beings or cockroaches, etc., lizards, etc. They not only eat, they are not only eat grains as such, but also flesh eaters. Even human being, you eat vegetables, you also eat mutton. So in that food chain is not always linear, one depending on the other. You will also see an organism occupying various trophic levels, forming what we call a web-like, a web. Hence, we call a food web. If it is linear, we call it a food chain. So food webs are generally, for example, you take cat, you take rat. Cat, for example, it takes milk, it takes, roti, etc. But simultaneously, it also feeds what we call rats. Rats are, they feed on grains. So the cat is eating both the grains and also the rats. Hence, a kind of web. If it's not linear, we call it as a food web, food chain. The other very important thing you have to know is, uh, trophic levels and ecological pyramids. Trophic levels, ecological pyramid. Trophic levels means, for example, food chain. So that each organism occupies one link, the next one link, stepwise. So each that step, what we call a trophic level. Producers, for example, grasshoppers are producers, first level. Then second level is the what we call grasshopper. The crop plant is a producer, first trophic level. Then grasshopper, second trophic level. Then third is your frog. Then comes your snake. Then comes your vulture. So you will see like this in a food chain, each link, this link we call trophic level. So In a food chain, the number of trophic levels vary. So generally you will find 3, in some cases more than 3, 4 or 5 trophic levels also seen. So now the other important thing is pyramids. This is very, very important in examination point of view. Hence I am concentrating on this. See, ecological pyramids. The ecological pyramids, Elton was the man who proposed this uh, ecological pyramid. Ecological graphical representation of relation between the organisms of various trophic levels is what we call ecological pyramids. The ecological pyramids are of 3 types. One is called pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. Pyramid of numbers means you concentrate on numbers. For example, in a grassland ecosystem or in a cropland ecosystem, take for example a field and a crops. Number of croplands are more than the number of grasshoppers. The grasshoppers are less than more than what we call frogs. Frogs are more than snake. Snakes are more than vulture. So here what is happening? The number of grass plants are more than. So from producers to consumer, what's happening? The number is falling. Hence, if you represent in the form of a graph, you find a cone, a triangle, an upright triangle. This will be upright. Base will be more, and the cone as you go tapers. But number is not always upright. It could be reverted. For example, take one tree. So number of trees is only one. So number of birds living on the tree, many. And the number of parasites living on the birds will be still many. So that means what is happening? Tree is one tree, 100 birds, and 1,000 parasites. So what is happening? From base to top, it is getting more, increased. So the triangle becomes what we call reverted. This is the pyramid, what we call inverted pyramid. In the first case, it is upright pyramid. So then pyramid of biomass. Biomass means the amount of biological matter. For example, grass. In a field, the grass plants, if you weigh them more than the weight of the grasshoppers, there will be more than the frogs, than that. So the biomass will be more at the bottom, and on the top it will be less. But this is not always. For example, take the biomass of an aquatic ecosystem. Take a pond. For example, in a pond, the phytoplankton weight is very less. Number is more. Weight, if you take them, little. And the small fish weight is more. And the big fish weight is still more. So it is increasing. So the number may be increasing or decreasing. It may be upright, the pyramid may be upright, or the pyramid may be inverted in numbers. So also in biomass. But the third is pyramid of energy. Pyramid of energy is always upright. See, the energy that is present in the grass plants is more than the energy that is present in grasshoppers. So as trophic levels increase from producers to first consumer, second consumer, tertiary consumer, and top carnivore, what's happening? The energy content decreases. Why? At each trophic level, some amount of energy is released in the form of heat, and the organisms do respiration. For their own respiration, they consume something. So that's why, as from the producers to the top carnivore, the the energy available gets less. Then briefly, I'll tell you about pollution. Of course, I need not tell briefly. In 5 minutes, I'll complete this. What is pollution? An unwanted change in the environment is called pollution. An unwanted change, an undesirable change in the environment is called pollution. You know this. Nowadays, everywhere pollution. Now, the pollution, for our convenience, divide it into air pollution, water pollution, and land pollution. Air pollution, of course, you know very well. So, the air pollution is because of the increase of the unwanted gases, especially oxides of nitrogen, oxides of carbon, and oxides of sulfur. Why? Because of the burning of coal, because of burning of fuel, because of burning of petrol and all these products, because of complete combustion or incomplete combustion. What is happening? The dangerous, gases are released, and thereby they are spoiling the atmosphere. If you are exposed to these spurious gases of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, or sulfur dioxide, you develop, throat infection, eye infection, lung infection, whatnot, even skin infection. So hence, we should keep our air clean. How? By reducing, conventional the petroleum products and going for, alternate source of energy, going for green energy. Now, hence, green buses, what we call, then electric buses are nowadays popularized. Wind energy is popularized. So thereby you can check the air pollution. Of course, water pollution. So why water pollution? Because of industrial revolution, number of factories have been established, and because of green revolution, our consumption of various fertilizers, your pesticides is increasing day by day more and more. And all these, even at sometimes what we, while transporting these petroleum products, there is a breakdown of ship wreckage, oil spills will be there. So all these are ultimately reaching where the water bodies. So thereby they are spoiling our waters. Nowadays even the effluents from households, effluents from the factories are let into rivers. So nowadays, no river has pure water. If you go to Ganga, Ganges is water is fully, polluted. The Yamuna, just you cannot see the Yamuna, even Godavari, even Musi, whatnot, Kaveri. No river as such in India has pure water except if you go to, Himalayan areas where still you can see pure water, except that, in all the, South Indian or East Indian, West Indian areas, because of the release of effluents from these areas day by day, the water is getting polluted. Our rivers are polluted, our wells are polluted, our tanks are polluted. So hence, by taking this polluted water, we are losing our health. What we suffer from jaundice, we suffer from typhoid, we suffer from cholera. So what not? So many diseases we are facing because of taking this polluted water. So hence, the water pollution has to be checked. So before releasing into the water bodies, the effluents are to be treated. Hence, STPs. So pollution, checking. So the dredging corporation of India, the silt is separated, and the effluent water is filtered at various levels, and so that ultimately the pure water, almost um, uh, water that is not harmful, will be released into the natural water bodies. So this is water pollution. Of course, land pollution is pollution that is taking place in land. Nowadays, no, because of agriculture and also because of construction, what we are doing? You are excavating, you are constructing dams, you are constructing roads. In the name of that, you are excavating so many minerals. All this, what is happening? The shape of the earth is losing. You will see so many, if you go to the coal belt areas, the entire, where you will see hundreds of wells. The area is losing its shape. So many wells, so many trenches you will see. So not only that, because of plastic nowadays, plastic is overuse of plastic and overuse of chemicals and release of even pesticides, etc. You are spoiling. So what's happening because of this? Our you know our soils, our crop fields are getting you know diminishing of useful microorganisms, various bacteria that are useful, that is nitrogen fixing bacteria, nitrate bacteria that are present in the soil are getting getting killed because of overuse of fertilizers, because of overuse of pesticides. So hence, we should take care and we should educate people not to spoil our environment, not to spoil the air, not to spoil the water, not to spoil the land. So this is about the ecology part. Of course, we tried to cover because this pollution topic is quite familiar to everybody can write about air pollution, water pollution, and land pollution. Hence, I gave only just a brief introduction only about that. So I think with this we have completed the syllabus that has been allotted to you. I think if you have any doubt, you can raise your doubt. But 3-4 minutes I'll give you. If you have any doubt, you please ask me. If you don't have any doubt, then let us call it a day. And I wish you all the best in your forthcoming theory examinations, especially core subject. Wish you all the best. Bye bye.